All right. Well, thank y'all for being here tonight as we get started with session number 3 of our studying Abraham, finding the biblical truth. One reason why I want to study Abraham is because Abraham has been used to derive a whole lot of doctrine, and I think that we need to do our own investigation, and I have a method of how I want to approach it. I want to remind you that this is my objective, okay? And have your own conclusions and assumptions about the matter, but this is how I'm approaching the matter. The purpose of this study is to understand Abraham according to biblical testimony. Its premise is that one must comprehend the events and details of Abram's life before one can properly interpret any and all references to him. That's my premise, that's my assumption, so maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but what I'm operating from is that we need to really know what happened in Abraham's life in the book of Genesis before we ever start going into the book of Romans, Galatians, James, you name it, any references to Abraham, okay? If we don't have the foundation, the information given in the order of God's revelation, then I think we can make some very major mistakes, okay? Making some assumptions that we shouldn't do, reading things into Abraham that we shouldn't read into. So that's my basic premise. And then, once the foundational record of Abraham is established, the biblical references will be analyzed. So we're really going to try to be as comprehensive as we can. My goal is pretty much any passage in the Bible that gives any reference to Abraham at all, we're going to look at, okay? So by the time it's all said and done, you hopefully have a pretty good idea of everything the Bible has to say about Abraham. And so tonight we're going to be, in session number 3, we're going to look at Abram's departure and arrival. Abram's departure and arrival. Now what I'm going to do is, since I'm the one-man operator here, I do want to check and make sure that our group listening here, if you don't have any complaints on audio, then I'm going to... hey, Skylar is with us online. That is good. So if you have any audio issues, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that everything is running just fine. So with that, let me get our slide back up and running here. So this will be session number 3, Abram's departure and arrival. I'm going to open us up a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you once again for the opportunity that we have to gather to study your word. I'm thankful for those that are with me tonight that are interested and have a desire to be good students of your word, approved workmen. And I pray tonight as we look at the life of Abram and the events as he departs from his country, his father's house, his kindred, to go to the land you'll show him, that we would just be good students and know what the word says. And with that, we pray that we'd honor you in all these things. Amen. All right, so with that being said, what we're going to look at first is the departure, okay? This is going to be in chapter 12, verse 4, is where we're going to pick up in the book of Genesis. And so, verse 4, so Abram departed. I'm going to make that a little bit larger there. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him. Now, he's departing from the land of Haran. In Genesis 11, you'll remember when we first got introduced to Terah. Terah and Abram, they all lived in Ur the Chaldees, which is very close to Babel. They leave out of Ur the Chaldees and they go up to Haran, okay? And in Genesis 12:4, Abram is leaving. His father has died, Terah, in the land of Haran, okay? And he's going to depart his country. He's going to a land that God is going to give to him, that God's going to show him. And really, he is leaving all of his former life behind. If you're leaving the land that you grew up in, and he's already left Ur, now he's leaving his father's house, he really is going to completely strike out on his own as a new man to a large degree. So there really isn't any ties because he's leaving his kindred behind as well. Now with that being said, he is bringing along Lot, and Lot went with him. Now, you're all very familiar with Lot. You've heard about him a lot. I'm going to make those jokes tonight. But Lot goes with him. Now, Lot is the son of Haran. Okay? Abram had 2 brothers, Haran and Nahor. And Haran, it's kind of interesting because they went to the land of Haran. And this is where I would say, to a degree, I think a lot of this is Genesis is saying, hey, here's where they went, and this is what we call it. Not necessarily what they called it in that day. So it's very possible that Haran is actually where they got the name from Abram's brother. So here's a map for you. This is just kind of a rough map, rough estimation, just to give you an idea of what the journey's like. But here's Ur of the Chaldees, kind of getting your bearing here. We're using a modern map just because that's what I have easy access to without having to steal from somebody. And so really traveling up kind of along the Euphrates River, I think that's the Euphrates, going up to somewhere around here is the region of Haran, okay? So it's not just a straight shot, and why that is, I don't know. Maybe they're traveling where the people are. This is a whole lot of desert, as you can tell in this map. Probably it was similar to what it is today. Maybe much more difficult traveling to go straight. You have the river right there. You have food. You've got a lot of different things. So they make it to Haran, and they are now going to depart out of Haran to go to the land of Israel. Okay, the land of Canaan is what it's being referred to in Genesis. And a few things about this, some background information. Lot accompanied Terah and Abram when they left out of Ur of the Chaldees. Genesis 11:28 recorded that Haran, the son of Terah, Abram's brother, trying to keep track of all the names here, died in the land of Ur of the Chaldees. Okay? It doesn't say how he died. Now, this is where, take it with a decent-sized grain of salt, the rabbinical Hebrew tradition holds that Haran, Lot's father, Abram's brother, was killed by Nimrod. Okay, that's kind of the baseline Hebrew rabbinical tradition. Okay, he was killed by Nimrod in Ur of the Chaldees. So Lot, basically now under Terah, who would be his grandfather, travels with them. There's really some more interesting stories, which there's a reason why I don't put a ton of weight on them. One of the interesting stories, but if you go to any Orthodox Jew and you start asking them about Terah and Abram and Haran and all this, the story goes, Terah, which is biblical, did worship idols. Okay, we know that from Joshua chapter 24. We're actually going to look at that passage tonight. So Terah was an idol worshiper, probably in all likelihood an idol maker, and basically, how the story goes, the tradition goes, and you're seeing how much emphasis I'm really putting on it. It is a story. It's not fact. It's not biblical testimony. Abram refuses to worship the idols. Terah, living in Ur, reports Abram to Nimrod. Nimrod's the big guy in charge, right? And Nimrod says, throw him into the furnace, the fiery furnace, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is, kind of similar story there. And except for that one's in the Bible. Long story short, Haran's off to the side and says, well, if Abram survives, I'll be with Abram. If he dies, I'll be with Nimrod. And Abram miraculously is kept alive in the fiery furnace. And so Haran says, I'm going to align myself with Abram, but then Nimrod takes Haran, throws him into the fire, and Haran is killed in the fire. That's how the story goes, whatever that's worth. But if you ever try to do any research on what happened to Haran, there's the rabbinical traditional story you're going to get. Regardless, Lot does go with him. And maybe it's because Abram's kind of the head of the family. Lot's somewhat under his care now. There is the other brother Nahor, but Terah's dead. His father Haran is dead. So maybe it's just natural Lot is now under Abram's care. So he takes Lot with him. And there will be some implications and ramifications of having Lot come along with him. Now, a few other things here. Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Okay? I want to talk about that for a moment. Scripture doesn't say a whole lot about the matter, but we do have to think about this to some degree. Okay, Abram is 75 years old when he leaves. Does anybody know how old Abraham was when he died? I remember the number. 175. Okay, so he's going to live for another 100 years. And I'm just taking the Bible for what it says. It's actual years. We're not playing with the calendar or anything like that. Was he leaving out of Haran, making the journey, a 75-year-old man in today's time, right? Think of a 75-year-old man, even a 75-year-old in great health. Is that Abram at this point? If so, he's going to spend the next 100 years of his life as an elderly man, we would say. And to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a person to age and mature at the rate we do, and then when you get to 75, you stay a 75-year-old man for the next 100 years. So what I did was, and it's very basic, okay, and we got some excellent math people in here. I just, to find a ratio, I just cross-multiplied and solved for x. And let's just say hypothetically, 175 years old is roughly around 95 for someone today. I mean, that's a good long life. We know some people who have made it that far, really close to making it that far. This would put Abram somewhere around 41 years old, if he's aging slower like a person would. Once again, some speculation there. So he's going to be around 41 years old, okay, when he departs. Does that sound a little bit more, I don't know, like it, I guess? For a man to be, for one, under his father's house. It kind of makes a little more sense, a 41-year-old man living with father in father's house as opposed to an elderly man, 75 years old. But also, Abram's going to do a lot of things in these coming chapters. He's going to travel to the land of Canaan. He's going to travel down to Egypt. He's going to be an important man. He's going to have a lot of people. He's going to gain wealth. And also, he's going to go to war. And he's going to save his, not to spoil some things, but save Lot. And defeat kings. I think probably defeat Nimrod as we watch this whole thing progress. Is this really the idea of a 75-year-old man, maybe with a bad back and arthritis, trying to ride his war horse into battle? Or is it more like, hey, we've got a mature man, 40s or so, maybe early 50s, still physically strong and able? I think we need to start thinking about some of these things. We read the numbers and we just think 75 in our time, but maybe not. Now, I will say, one of the things that you're probably instantly thinking about is, okay, but hold on now. What does that do for the whole Abram and Sarah are in old age by the time Isaac comes along? Because that's going to be a big part of the story. You might know how long Sarah lived until she died. Pretty sure it was 125, maybe 127. Sarah was roughly about 10 years younger than Abram, and we knew year by year people were not living as long. After the flood, people's lifespan significantly starts going down. I'm just going to say my speculation is Sarah was anywhere, as far as if we're trying to do the adjusted age, okay, when she became with child with Isaac, she could have been somewhere around our time of a woman of 55 to 60 or so in age. And so I would say, I think that if we heard a story of a couple in their 50s, early 60s expecting a child, that would be quite shocking to us. So question some of my theory here on the aging process, but I just felt like I needed to talk about it for a moment to kind of give you an idea here. So with all that being said, he's 75 years old. He departs out of Haran. And now, in verse 5, he takes Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. Now, let's stop right there for a moment, because, hold on, how did we get these substances? How did we get these souls? What's going on? The word souls there is a word of people. That's most often how it's used there. What's going on? We have to do a little bit of speculation. I'm going to say I think these are probably in the form of servants, manservants, maidservants that Abram somehow obtained in the days in which he was in Haran. Why would he gain these? And why would he gain substance? I'll remind you, at the beginning of the chapter, God said, I will bless you. perhaps sometimes we think the blessing only started maybe when he gets to the land of Canaan, but maybe God started blessing Abram from the very get-go. From that moment, he gets these things. He gets from God, I will bless you, I will give you this land. Maybe Abram was already starting to be blessed. Now, for some people, that would not make them feel good. That would make them feel uneasy. Because hold on now, are you saying that God blessed Abram by giving him servants? That doesn't sound very good, right? Because isn't slavery bad? And that's immediately what we go to. We do need to think about historical context here. Because in those days, either you were somebody who had a lot or you were somebody who had a little. And if there was somebody who came along and said, you'll work for me, you'll live with me, and I'll make sure that you're fed and clothed and you have a place to sleep, it's hard to ask for much more than that. Okay, that's just how society was and really to a degree has been for a very long time. Okay, so don't see a little bit of indication that God's blessing Abram in the fact of how quickly all this progresses. So here we go. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. And it's just as simple as that. Once again, I'll show you our map here of the traveling. Make it to Haran. They travel all the way from Haran down here into the land of Canaan. No mention of any events. I guess it was a pretty boring trip. I guess he just got on I-40 and set cruise control and didn't worry about it, right? I would imagine if there was anything of importance or significance that happened on the journey, it would have been mentioned, right? But it just says they went into Canaan. Perhaps, sometimes when people pray for traveling graces, maybe Abram was already having traveling graces from the Lord too. He was living the charmed life. He was the man called by God, blessed by God. And so they make it into Canaan quite quickly. So with that, that's going to lead us to the next part, arrival in Shechem. You will notice it is spelt differently here in this verse, but that's okay. It's the same name. It just depends on, are they basing the spelling from the Greek or the Hebrew? That's really the distinguishing factor there. So when you see Sikkim, it's also Shechem, all right? So they arrive in Shechem here. So we get down to verse 6. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. All right, a few things that I want to note here. So let's look at our map here. We're zooming in now on the land of Israel, okay? So he's coming down from Haran. You can see that little dot right there is the Sea of Galilee. Down here is the Dead Sea. And so this is the land of Canaan. One day will be called Israel. But Shechem is here. Shechem lies, it's kind of a broader area of land, especially in the Old Testament usage. But think of Samaria between Galilee and Judea and kind of favoring towards the Jordan. Okay, that's kind of where the Jordan River just runs straight from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. And so we're in this region here. Here he arrives in Shechem. Some interesting things here. If we're going to be a good student of Abraham's life, you kind of have to stop and make note of some things, because otherwise you're not going to fully appreciate all this. So Shechem, how many of you have heard of Shechem before? Are y'all very familiar with Shechem? You probably heard it once or twice. It's probably one of those names that you'll think, yeah, I recall something about Shechem, something about Hebron, something about Bethel. There's those names you're familiar with. And then, you say you read in the book of Hezekiah, and then you realize, oh, there is no book of Hezekiah. But there is a Hezekiah. He is there. So regardless, we've got Shechem. Shechem is an interesting place. The first time that you see Shechem really outside of Abraham's story, it's one that you teach all your little kids in Sunday school. Okay? This is the story of Jacob's sons. what happened was they were living in the land in Shechem at the time, and there was a man named Shechem. I wonder how Shechem got its name. There was a man named Shechem, and the sons of Jacob, a daughter of Leah, which made her a sister of the sons of Jacob, her name was Dinah. The man Shechem took her and laid with her. All right? And Jacob hears about it but remains silent until his sons return. Okay? I'm giving you the short story. If you want to hear the whole thing, go to Genesis chapter 34. It'd be a great one for reading with your kids tonight. And in chapter 34, basically, the sons do a little act of deception. They say to Shechem and Shechem's father and all the men with him, hey, and Shechem does go to him and says, I want to marry Dinah. He got some things out of order, I think, there, but that's what he wants. He wants to marry Dinah. And the sons of Jacob say, all right, but here's the rule. You can only take her as a wife if you be circumcised, you and all the men with you. All right? And so they agree to all be circumcised. That's a big commitment, especially being a grown man. Anyways, so they agree to the thing, and they get circumcised. And I would imagine there's a healing process there. And on the third day, in the Bible using the King James language, while they were still sore, the sons of Jacob go in and slaughter every single one of them. And that's what happens. And then Jacob does tell them, because you did this, it's not entirely like Jacob is completely upset with his sons. It's just like, okay, listen, you did this. We're going to need to pack up the tents and move on, because it's not going to be good for us to be here. So there's one of your bonus stories about Shechem, if you want to recall that one. I'll tell Jake about it tonight. The next time you see Shechem, well, I shouldn't say that, but one of the major times you see Shechem is in Joshua chapter 24. And Joshua chapter 24 is actually quite an interesting passage. It's once really Joshua has conquered much of the land of Canaan. Not all of it, but much of it. And it's about time for each tribe to go to their own allotted land. Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem. That's the same one as Sichem over here in the 6th verse of Genesis 12. And called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and for their judges and for their officers, and they presented themselves before the Lord. Basically, how the whole thing goes is Joshua says, men, today if we sin against God, if we reject Him, then we will not be forgiven from Him. He is going to judge us. But today, if we will be obedient, God will uphold us. He will bless the nation. I'm giving a very quick paraphrase there. And essentially, Israel says, all right, we'll keep the commandments. We'll be faithful to God. We will not sin against God. And what ends up happening here at the end of the chapter at Shechem, let's see here. Here it is. The people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. And as a matter of fact, I don't want to overlook it. I forgot. This is the chapter that we read last time in verse 2 that mentions Terah. It says, and Joshua said unto all the people, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, your fathers dwelt on the other side of the flood. Don't think Noah, ark, animals. Think great river Euphrates. In old time, even Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nachor, and they served other gods. There's the reference there to Terah, serving other gods, false gods. So with that, they kind of go through the whole history. Your father Abram, from the other side of the flood, led him through all the land of Canaan and multiplied his seed. Basically gives a brief history on the matter. And then Joshua said unto the people, ye are witnesses against yourselves that ye have chosen you the Lord to serve him. And they said, we are witnesses. And what ends up happening is Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and set them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God and took a great stone and set it up there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And what most tradition's going to say, maybe even some biblical scholars are going to argue, is that it's specifically in the place of Shechem unto the plain of Moreh. That's where they did it. The same place where Abraham first arrived in the land of Canaan, and God said, as we're going to see, this is it. That's where Israel made the covenant promise to God. Joshua set up the great stone, placing it under the oak tree. So Shechem is a place of great significance. There's a bunch of other interesting things that happen in Shechem, and some other interesting stories you could tell your kids about on family Bible reading time. But there's a rundown on Shechem. Now, verse 7. Do I have anything to add to Moreh? Oh, one thing about the plain of Moreh, and there's other things about Moreh as well, but do you remember the story of Gideon, and he goes to fight the Midianites, and God says, you got too many men. He whittles it down to 300. That happens in the plain of Moreh, okay? And I'm also not ready to jump into verse 7, because I do need to add that it mentions here, and the Canaanite was then in the land, okay? Now, let's try to exercise your minds. Canaan was the son of who? You may recall. I got it in your notes here, I'm pretty sure. So, Canaan was the son of Ham, okay? When Ham, of course, revealed the nakedness of his father in that interesting story, Lord said, blessed be the God of Shem, Canaan will be his servant, right? The Canaanites were the descendants of Ham, and they lived, that's why it's called the land of Canaan. That's where they dwelled. That's where they were. And so the Canaanites also we're going to see, I thought I had I'll show that to you in just a moment. But the Canaanites were descendants of Ham. We're also going to find later in the Bible that they are somehow carrying the Nephilim bloodline, because there's giants who live in the land of Canaan. And so what you have is the promise or the statement that God makes that blessed be the God of Shem, Canaan will be his servant. Now you have Abram, who is the descendant of Shem, who has now arrived in the land. Okay? And so you have this interesting dynamic. You also have Nimrod, and guess who his father was? Cush, but Cush was also coming from Ham. So you've got some interesting dynamics there with Nimrod, the Canaanites, versus the man from Shem's lineage. All of this Bible knowledge is free, and if you ever win Bible Jeopardy, I hope that you share the winnings. Now, verse 7. And the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. So when Abram gets to Shechem in the plain of Moreh, God says to him that this is the land I'm going to give you. Keep in mind, Abram was not really told what land he was going to possess. He was just departing from his country to go to the land God would show him. And it says here, I want you to know, the Lord appeared unto Abram. What does that mean? The most literal meaning is he can be seen. Abram can see the Lord. He appeared to him. Now, does this mean somehow like we may have a Christophany, which is a fancy theological term, so you can write this down to be smart. The pre-incarnate Christ, okay? Think Melchizedek. Think the angel of the Lord, the captain of the Lord the captain of the hosts. Very likely Christ, God himself, appearing to men before actually coming to earth in the flesh, in the Gospels. So, with that, is that how the Lord appeared to Abram? Maybe. Also, it is possible that maybe God was leading Abram similar to how he led Israel out of Egypt. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. Maybe it's somehow, in some way, God's appearing to Abram. But regardless, the Lord appears to him and says, I'm going to give you this land. And Abram responds by building an altar. An altar is an altar. It's for the purpose of sacrifices. And what you have is, as far as we know in history, this is the first altar constructed and made in the land of Canaan. And a sacrifice being offered to God in the land that will be Israel and the land eventually that will be the Messianic kingdom. Okay, so this is the first one made. Very possible that even in the days of Joshua at Moreh, maybe the altar that Abram built was still there. I don't know. It's interesting to speculate, but the Lord appeared unto him there. Now, what's interesting is you would think that he's done, right? He's made it. He's reached the place. God says, this is the land I'm going to give your seed. So you would think, all right, there he goes. He's going to start making plans for the house and the 2-car garage and the picket fence. But no, that's not what happens. He continues to journey. And so what he's going to do now is, we've zoomed in a little bit more. So here's the Sea of Galilee. Here's Shechem, all right? And he's going to travel now to Bethel. Bethel is a town a little bit further north of Jerusalem. Not by much, but a little bit. And this is just kind of rough placement here. There's not a precise dot for a reason. Bethel, if you ever see that L there, that's God. Elohim, El, Israel. El is a God reference there. And then you have Bet. Bet is house. So Bethel means house of God. So with that, he's going to travel to Bethel. Verse 8, and he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west. I think I recall a video that maybe Evan sent me a while back, a preacher reading that verse and flubbing up the words, and I was really careful not to make the same mistake. So he pitched his tent, having Bethel on, yeah, you remember it now, don't you, on the west, and Hai on the east. This is Ai, if you recall, the first licking that gave Israel when they entered into the land of Canaan. Ai, okay, that's Ai there. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, so he built another one, and called upon the name of the Lord. A few things about Bethel. Bethel is a place of it's mentioned many times in the Bible. Jacob's dream, the stairway to heaven, that is where he has the vision of Bethel. Okay? Or that's where he had the vision or the dream, in Bethel. Bethel, and that's where he fled from Esau, by the way. He went to Bethel. Bethel was also the place prior to the building of the temple and prior to David bringing the ark to Jerusalem, was where the ark was kept for a time. It was kept at Bethel, and Bethel was a significant place of worship for the Israelites. And so with that, he has traveled now. He's really journeyed through quite a great deal of the land of Canaan. I mean, he enters in kind of in the region of Galilee, comes down to the middle ground, Samaria region. Now he's very close to Jerusalem itself. But that's not all the land of Israel. He's going to go further down still. It's kind of an amazing thing. For the most part, if you look at biblical Israel, and even to a degree historical Israel, like the places that are green is kind of the land that's promised. A lot of the desert is not, like when you get further south here, you're starting to get beyond the regions of Israel, but all the green you see, and then even there's green to the east of Jordan. But he's traveling down. So there is some speculation. Why are we still traveling? Why are we still going? Why is he not stopped? One speculation is maybe Abram's making a mistake. Maybe he doesn't realize that he's reached it. He needs to stop. He needs to be content. Another theory is, and when I was reading Rashi, once again, Rashi is our Jewish rabbi from the 800s AD, his position was that essentially God was just giving him the tour, showing him all of it, taking him throughout the whole land. So he's going to go down all the way south, probably the farthest reaches of the land of Canaan. And then next week, yes, I'll be here next week. Next week, we're going to see that there's a famine. And now he's going to go into Egypt. And we're going to see how all of that plays out. So with all that being said, I didn't want to go into the rest of it just because I didn't know how much time that we were going to be spending here. One of the interesting bonuses that I'll share with you, I didn't put it in your notes, And I almost didn't want to even mention it tonight, but I think it's worth it, and plus we've got a little bit extra time to share the matter. Another idea or concept that some of the rabbis have, and one reason why I keep referencing the rabbis is because I'm not impressed with a lot of Christian scholarship on the Old Testament, because we just don't do a lot of it. And I think if we were better Old Testament students, Hebrew Scripture students, we wouldn't get the New Testament so wrong. We may not even call it the New Testament if we were better students of the Hebrew Scriptures. But one reason why I like it is they really do pore over it and they really think about it. And they think, okay, is it a coincidence that Abram arrives in Shechem and the plain of Moreh? Because these are significant places for Israel. Is that just mere coincidence? And maybe so. But also he goes to Bethel, which is a very significant place. And he goes further south, which they understand to be Jerusalem itself, and to see the rest of it. One of the interesting theories they have, or they wouldn't even call it a theory, they would just say it's an outright traditional view, is God was showing Abram the future to a degree. When they arrived in Shechem, God explained to Abram that the sons of Jacob would go to war against Shechem, and these things would unfold. And when he took him to Bethel, and he was being told what's going to happen, future things that are going to befall his offspring, the nation that will come from him. That sounds kind of far-fetched, but I think when we start expanding our study on Abram, when we get to the Greek Scriptures, I think even Paul himself would say that there was let's say even Christ. Christ said to the scribes, Pharisees, whichever group was going against him that day, that Abraham looked forward to my day and rejoiced to see it. Maybe there was a deal of things that God revealed to Abram that he knew would come to pass. So I think that's interesting that even the rabbis who wouldn't agree with Jesus being their Messiah, saying that Abram foresaw and foreknew Christ coming and rejoiced to see it and all those things, even they're saying there was some degree of, hey, God's showing Abram all the land, and it's almost like you look at the map, and he's saying, over here, we're going to have the sons of Jacob go to war against Shechem. Trying to think where, over here somewhere, you're going to have one of your descendants square off against a giant, and so on and so on it goes. Hey, let me take you down to the Red Sea. It's going to part one day, and I'm going to deliver your descendants. There's no telling what all may have taken place in that journey. But it is very interesting to think about all the places that Abram went that are noted by name are places of very important significance in the Old Testament story and events that unfold. So with that, do I have any questions or comments? You're all experts now on Genesis chapter 12, verses 4 through 8, right? You know all the fun facts about Shechem. Okay. So if you can go tell Oakland the story that you learned about Shechem. Then,
I've heard Sikkim a lot
Sikkim,
more than Shechem.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess I'll let you go. Everybody who joined us online, really appreciate all of you. Thank you. And we'll be back to our next session next week to continue the journey to Egypt. All right? So let me close out in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for the time we've had once again to study this. And Lord, as we look at the biblical testimony, it's always the ultimate standard. And what we know for certain is that you kept your word and you led Abram into that land for his seed to possess. And God, we know he's going to journey on. There's going to be more events unfold. But at the same time, Lord, we do like to ponder on your word and think about these different possibilities and consider